Hold on to your butt.
Da-da-da. Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 164 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. As usual, I'm joined by Mary, a woman who has been known at times to be right with liquor herself. I am just one more stain on the old banner named Darren. Sic Semper Tyrannis. Mary, how are we doing?
Good. How are you? It's quite the intro.
I'm doing fantastic. It's Friday night. Life is good. It's warm. We are doing well. So how are you up to? What's going on with you?
I have boxed wine and it's Friday night. I'm happy.
Oh, classy.
Yeah,
box
class
wine.
it up here at the 11th Corps headquarters with the
Definitely.
Cabernet Sauvignon.
Tell me about it. But we are approaching spring, and with it, Lincoln Assassination season, Mary. And whenever we talk about this subject, there's only one guy we bring in. That is our friend, historian, and all-around sockdologizing old man trap himself, Dave Taylor. What's going on, Dave? How are you?
Thanks so much for having me in my favorite podcast. I'm glad to make return visits. You guys want me to come back over and over. Always happy to talk Lincoln Assassination with y'all.
No, it's awesome to have you back on here. So thank you for doing this with us tonight.
And for people who somehow don't know Dave, he's been doing several public appearances discussing John Wilkes Booth and the assassination, as well as many YouTube videos he's done. And it is timely that we're going to have him on because I don't know if you know this, Mary, but he's running tours of the Lincoln assassination that we're going to talk a lot about starting this spring. But before we get started, Dave, let's talk about your tours, when they are, how to sign up, and what people can expect when they take them.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. I mean, so the genesis of this is for years, I was one of the guides for the John Wilkes Booth Escape Route tours that the Surratt Society used to perform, and they had been doing them since the 1970s, starting on a school bus and taking people from Ford's Theater all the way down to the Garrett Farm site where Booth was cornered and killed. But when COVID happened, they shut down those tours, and then they just haven't been able to restart them. And so I really miss doing them. I really love doing them. It was my favorite things to do. And so, it's been a few years, and I'm like, I'm going to see if I can start them up. So yeah, I've kind of started my own little business, building off of what I learned doing that for several years. And so, yeah, we're called Lincoln Assassination Tours. Right now, our only tour is the Booth Escape Route, but I'm hoping in the future to have other more very niche tours relating to different aspects of the assassination, walking tours, maybe of some of the cemeteries or, doing some other visits, that encompass this bigger idea about the Lincoln assassination. But for our first tours, we're starting this spring. Our first tour is March 14th, which is coming up it's only 2 weeks from when we're recording this. So I'm really excited to get back out there. And then we have two more in April, on April 18th and April 19th, which is a Saturday and a Sunday, two different tours that we'll be doing in the spring. And then hopefully some more in the fall, and we'll just keep the ball rolling and take people back down the escape route, which is just, I think, the best way to interact with this history is just to experience it firsthand. As you two know, because you guys have done this tour on your own many times.
Many times. So before we kind of get into the whole tour, how can people sign up? How do how's it goes? When do they get there? When does it end? Just the nuts and bolts of it first, and we'll talk about we'll fill in the gaps. But just so people who are listening to this, they want to sign up. What's the best way they can sign up?
So, we're likely to do in the future. So everything's online. So our website is LincolnAssassinationTours.com. Lots of letters to type, but you understand what you're signing up for then when you type all that in. And so, the ticket sales kind of goes through the Eventbrite platform, which is just a way of making sure it's an easy way to do it. But you go to Lincoln Assassination Tours, you can see how to sign up. Our tours actually start and end at the Branch Avenue Metro Station, which is it's in Maryland. It's one of the DC Metro stops. It's got free parking on weekends and lots of space and stuff like that, so people can park there. You meet the bus, we hop on the bus, and then we take you, back into DC to see Ford's Theater and those areas, and then we go south and we go right back to Branch Avenue when we're done. So it's a nice meeting place, and it's accessible to people who live in the area and want to take the metro. They can just, leave their cars or their homes in DC and come on and then come visit us. So yeah, that's kind of, you can buy your tickets at LincolnAssassinationTours.com, and we'll take you all the way through.
Awesome.
Right, and you get lunch, you get the bus trip.
Oh yeah, lunch is included, which was different from the Surratt Society tours where you had to pay lunch on your own. So yeah, we're still, of course, for the first tour. We'll see how long it takes now to do, because it's been a few years, and we've added a museum that we didn't visit before because it didn't exist as a museum before, and we'll talk about that as we get further on. So we're still figuring out the timeline, but lunch is included this time, where it's going to be a box lunch on the bus as we ride south. It kind of saves us a little time than when we used to kind of stay at a restaurant. So we're thinking it's going to be a 10.5-hour tour, but really these first few tours will get that timeline and really see what it is, and you see how long it takes us. But it's a full day tour, and you get, we have bathroom breaks. Obviously we have museums we stop by, historical sites that you don't have access to otherwise. And you really see the whole breadth of Booth's attempted escape all the way through DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Very cool. And I was just going to say, for our listeners, we will post a link on our Facebook page, as well as Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, because I'm not up on that stuff, apparently, as well as Instagram. We will post how to access or just get onto your website, LincolnAssassinationTours.com, so they can sign up for it.
And we have a Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky as well, starting having to do all the social media. That's the way you connect with people. So yeah, you guys have already shared some of our stuff on there, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and Mary, to your point, you don't have to have a broken left leg to do this tour. You asked me that question before.
If you don't have a broken left leg, to be honest.
You don't have to do it. So if you have one, that's great. If you don't, then that's fine too. Maybe you can break it along the way. Who knows?
That's one thing I've debated with. I just have to say, it just made me think, we've done, when we did the Lincoln Assassination Tour with our friends, there was one in our group that was adamant that Booth broke his leg from the horse, the horse fell on him, and I was like, no, I'm pretty sure it was that gigantic leap off the stage. But no one really knows.
I don't pick a side on that one.
Yeah, it's debatable. But we were it got heated at one point. I was like, whoa.
Oh, you're throwing down.
Oh yeah, well, it could be how it is with these things. So, but for this episode, we're going to talk about Booth's escapes from Ford's Theater on April 14th of 1865, which culminated in his death at the Garrett Farm in Virginia 12 days later. And we're going to talk about the stops along the way, which conveniently are stops on Dave's tour. So let's just start. Actually, it's just funny how this works out.
What a coincidence.
It was nice of him to do this so we could exactly on your schedule.
It was nice of John Wilkes Booth to consider a tour in the future.
It's like he knew. So let's start Friday, April 14th. Okay, John Wilkes Booth, he assassinates President Abraham Lincoln at the Ford's Theater. And he fled via Baptist Alley, which is behind the theater. And, Booth rode on horseback down Pennsylvania Avenue and 11th Street to the Navy Yard Bridge. The actor escaped the city by basically talking his way across that closed bridge, as the sentries had not yet heard about the assassination. Now, Booth, the sentry in charge, was a guy named Sergeant Silas Tower Cobb, who was from Holliston, Massachusetts, Mary, our old neck of the woods, and allowed him to pass. Now, the conspiracy theories, which are many with this thing, and this is one of the great things about this whole thing, is that Booth gave him the secret TB Road password that allowed him to cross. Now, personally, I think TB stood for Tom Brady. I mean, he was from Massachusetts, Booth was. So if you think about it, he was a Pats fan, right? But somewhere
you mean Cobb? Cobb
was for, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it.
Somewhere that goes to Finest Spades and Otto Eisenschimmel, their heads are exploding right now. But getting serious with this, Cobb later let Davy Harold cross the river as well. He lied. His name was Smith and all that stuff. So I guess we could talk about the beginning part of that and how that's all going to work out.
Yeah, so our tour, again, it starts outside of DC because there's more parking there. It's a little bit easier. So we start in Maryland. And then, so it's all by a nice chartered bus, air conditioned, lots of room. And so we're going to take participants into DC. And then we're going to do the same thing where we're going to kind of pull up and disembark from the bus and go into Baptist Alley, so that we're starting our day kind of escaping out the back door, just like Booth did. So we'll take you into the back, kind of see the remnants of also, what happened happened to Ford's. We'll take what happened to Ford happened at Ford's then, and then the history of it after, how it turned from this theater to this big old like warehouse for the pension records and everything like that, and then back into a theater again. And you can see the remnants of all those different eras on the back of Ford's, which is why I like it. The front, has the 1865 appearance, but the back shows you the entire history of that structure. And then after we get back on the bus, we're going to drive you through DC. Because we're not exactly sure Booth's exact routes once he gets onto F Street until he gets to the Navy Yard Bridge. Generally, we believe he rode south around the Capitol. Some people heard some, quick riding horse riders around, that Booth was around there. But we're going to deviate a little bit so we can see a couple sites in DC, which includes, I know one of your favorite haunts, Darren, the Walk and Roll. On H Street, which is Mary Surratt's boarding house, which is now in DC Chinatown. So we'll drive by there so you can get a sense of where the conspiracy was hatched, as Andrew Johnson said, where the egg was kept, or the egg roll was kept nowadays.
Egg roll was hatched,
Yeah, so we'll drive by that so you can see it, and then as we head south, we drive by the home of David Harold, which was near the Washington Navy Yard, and so it's right in front of the Navy Yard gates, and so we'll point out kind of where he lived and talk about his connection, and obviously he catches up with Booth, after they cross out, and then we'll cross over that 11th Street Bridge, just like Booth did. Obviously, it's moved over just a little bit. It's not the same bridge as 1865. And then we really, from then on, we stick as best we can to Booth's known routes after from that escape. So we'll go down Good Hope Hill, through I think it's now Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard or something like that, and continue on our way, passing, even pulling off to get to the approximate site of Soper's Hill, where Harold managed to catch up with Booth, and they continued on their way. So the bus tour for that point is we get out at Baptist Alley, get back on, and then we drive and see these sites in D.C. before we also cross the river and make our way into Maryland.
It's funny. History is about ironies, as I think about it. Silas Cobb, speaking of him, he died 2 years later. I mean, this, Dave. But Mary, do you know how
I've been to his grave just like you.
You know how Silas Cobb died. Now, think about irony. He let these two guys cross the river. So how do you think Silas Cobb died?
He fell off a bridge.
He drowned in a river.
He drowned trying to cross a river.
And he's buried in Holliston. Dave mentions if you could go see his grave, but it's pretty funny. So to Dave's point, he meets.
Or was he pushed to cover up that he knew too much? Was he pushed into the river?
Oh, we're getting into the conspiracy now.
Of course, you can always find conspiracy if you want to.
It might have been Tom Brady who pushed him. Just saying.
Of course,
give it away
too much.
But he's going to meet up with co-conspirator David Harold, just like he is in Maryland, and they're going to proceed to Surratt's Tavern. Again, it's in Clinton, Maryland, Surrattsville, and the cool people have Surrattsville T-shirts, by the way. Just saying. And he's going to get there just about midnight or so on the 15th. And and we were talking a second ago about the broken leg, and did he fall from his horse, and that left fibula is broken? Did he jump off the Ford's Theater? And it's just one of those things that's kind of falls into the myth of this whole thing with this. And so as we go through this tour, I'm sure these conversations will come up.
Always does. Every tour, people want to know how he broke his leg. And I think they're always disappointed with me when I'm like, I can't tell you for certain, which is so much of history. I can tell you the two competing theories and the evidence supporting them. But truly, unless we make a time machine, we'll never know exactly, because somebody was lying. Booth, said he did it when he made the jump, but he also said he yelled out before he shot Lincoln, which he absolutely did not do before he shot Lincoln. So there's all these competing ideas of like, somebody's lying, because then when they got to Mudd's, they told him it was a horse falling on him. So Booth lied at some point, but people always want to know, and they're disappointed that we don't have a definite answer.
No, it was exactly. I mean, I think when he jumped off, because it seems to make more sense.
That's always made sense to me too, because I don't know, like that kind of leap and just the way he landed. And too, like people have said, like, well, he was able to walk off the stage, like run off the stage. I'm like, well, he's got adrenaline flowing through him, absolutely. And that's going to dull any pain that he has as well. Like until the adrenaline leaves you, like he probably would not have felt any pain at all. He would have just been going.
And the fibula is not the weight-bearing bone. It will still hurt, like you said, but it is the tibia in the lower leg, and he had it very low down. So all of that is accurate, that he absolutely could have broken it on that jump to the stage, and adrenaline and the need to get out of Dodge. Now, mounting the horse would have been quite painful for him in Baptist Alley because of the way in which you have to mount using your left leg. But absolutely, he would have been able to do it. But I do say it's compelling, the other ideas about the horse fall, because the break that he had is a very typical equestrian injury. When you fall and a horse falls on you and it pins your foot there, it snaps right there across. And so that's why we can't completely disregard that theory either. And like I said, they tell people, like when they get to Dr. Mudd's, they say it was when a horse fell on him. Now that's all filtered through the words of like Dr. Mudd, who is also very careful in what he says because of his own previous involvement. So it's just, it makes it so difficult. But yeah, it's what makes, I think, the story interesting is that there are these big what ifs and just these coincidences too, though. No matter how he broke it, that ultimately led to his demise. Without that broken leg, he would have gotten so much farther. Like he probably could have escaped, maybe made an escape into Mexico or whatever, and it just changes the history completely. That in this act, at one point in this act, he breaks it, and that becomes a fatal wound to him essentially because it slows him down so much.
Oh, there's no question. You know, so he's going to ultimately get to Surratt's. He's going to meet the very charismatic John Lloyd. We talk about him, and he's a guy. He's an interesting cat in history, and he reports that when he gets there, that John Lloyd was right with liquor. A great quote. When your boss catches you drinking, I'm not drunk. I'm right with liquor. It just sounds so much better, right? And it's funny because John, speaking of spectacular deaths, he had a great one too.
Yeah, yes, he did.
I mean, Christmas right before 1892, he's walking in Washington D.C. when a bunch of fallen bricks fall on him, and he gets squished by fallen bricks. He's buried today about a 9-iron shot from Mary Surratt, so over in Washington, Mount Albany. So it's just when you look at this whole thing. And as you begin to make travels to these different places, it just, you can't make this stuff up sometimes. It just is.
I was just going to say, this like whole thing, like how these people connected with the assassination are dying. It's kind of like King Tut, like when they opened his tomb and then everybody like dies in weird ways or whatever, or like soon afterwards, it's like the curse.
Oh yeah. So Dave, let's talk about, Davy Harold and John Wilkes Booth, they're going to get to Surratt's Tavern right around midnight on the 15th. And we can kind of go what happens next.
Well, on part of they are not there for very long, as you described. Because of Booth's broken leg, he's not going to get off, the horse. Davy will go in, grab some whiskey, tell Mr. Right Smart and Liquor to get the shooting iron that had been hidden there, the carbine rifles. They'll take one of them, and then within 5 minutes, they're gone, bragging as they leave. I'm pretty sure we have killed the president and the Secretary of State, and Lloyd in his stupor is just like, well, I don't know what to do with that. And he just goes back to sleep. But in our tours, luckily we spend more time at the Surratt House Museum. So when we get there, we actually, we split the group up because we got a full, bus holds about 50 people. So that's a lot of people going into a historic home at once. And so they usually have a couple docents for us that some people start on the upstairs and the downstairs, and they tell the story of, the Surratt property, about the enslaved population that lived there, about Booth and Harold and the Lincoln assassination. And so while half of the group is pretty much in the historic house, the other half enjoys the visitor center, the bathroom, of course, which is always very popular. And they're actually, for us, they're going to open up the research center and have some artifacts out for people to look at, some parts from their collection that usually is just, you have to make a special appointment to visit the library. So we're really excited about doing that people have a chance. They're going to surprise me, what they decide to pick and pull. But I do know they have a Mary Surratt's original headstone, which got broken by a lawnmower, I think, in the 50s. And then it was just donated to the Surratt House Museum. They're like, would you like this one? And then the one that's there now has been there since I think the 50s, maybe a little later, it might be the 60s. But so we're excited to be able to look at that. So we'll spend about an hour at the Surratt House, kind of getting a tour of that whole campus before we continue on our way.
That's very cool. That the research center is open to. So I guess that's another
that's brand new, and I'm very excited about that.
That's another bonus of going on this tour with you, is that people are going to get into places that if they were just doing it on their own, they normally wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. And that's the hard thing. I mean, it's easy. There's the Civil War Trails program, which is wonderful. Yeah. I love the folks at the Civil War Trails. And they have the markers that are at a lot of these places that we visit. But it's just so different when you're on your own and you're just reading the text of a historic marker and then going to the next one. But even taking apart a tour like this, I am talking the entire time pretty much. I only get a break when we go to the museums and somebody else takes over for me. Otherwise, there's so much to tell that I am narrating throughout the tour. And so you really get surrounded with it and get pretty much, I say an entire book's worth by the time, 10 and a half hours, 11 hours go through, and you learn more than you ever wanted to know about the Lincoln assassination and Booth's escape.
Yeah, the Surratt Tavern's great. It's a great place to visit.
Yep.
You can visit a lot of the things. But go back to the story. So at this point, they're out of there pretty quickly. They're going to go just up the road to go find Dr. Samuel Mudd. He needs his leg is broken. He needs a doctor. And so this is a fascinating part of the story too, because as we talk, if anyone's visited the Mudd house, they do such a fantastic job, and there's usually a Mudd there when you go visit. There's a relative of one of them a lot of times. So
the caretaker who lives upstairs and keeps an eye on the house. Yes, he is a Mudd, correct? Yeah.
So if you happen to go there and you start, Mudd should have been hanged, just keep in mind just you might want to tread light on that one.
Yeah.
When you go.
We had to tell the people we were with. We're like, if you feel this way, just don't.
Just keep it under your hat.
I will say the caretaker Mudd, he's heard it all. He's pretty chill. Yeah. I think he's okay. There are other descendants who, historically, when the Mudd house opened as a museum, it was the Mudd family home up until the 1970s when one of Dr. Mudd's granddaughters said that she saw her grandfather's ghost, who instructed her to turn it into a museum. And so she started the process between the 70s and the 80s. They kind of got money from different grants to restore it to kind of what it looked like. She had to kick out her own brother who had been living there and was like, no, this has to become a museum. And so there was a time especially where you couldn't say anything bad about Grandpappy Mudd. But I will say my favorite part is that Mudd House has grown considerably. Even when I first moved out east and I went there the first time, same thing. Some of those docents were Mudds, and if you said anything bad, you would hear about it and you would not be allowed to stay very long. But I will say Mudd House has had a great growth, and that they've really come to terms with their history as complex. And, Mudd is always going to be a controversial figure about how much he knew and when he knew it, which is a compelling story. But I think the folks at Mudd's have just really updated with the times to really present an honest look at Dr. Mudd's involvement and the debate over his innocence, and they do not shy away from his past as an enslaver, and in fact as kind of a terrible master who shot one of his slaves in the leg. Like, they don't pull their punches anymore, and that's just wonderful to see, because his even just 15 years ago you went there, you would hear a very different story, but they are more to the truth now, and part of that is because the Mudd family is a little less involved than they were, and I think that is to the benefit. You're too close if it's your kin and you kind of have skin in the game. To have the more objective historians kind of come in really has made a huge difference for them.
I completely. Oh, sorry.
I was going to, when you visit it, like a lot of these places you visit, they have period furniture and stuff like that. They have the real stuff there. You can look
because it was in the house still. Yeah.
Look in the very mirror, John Wilkes Booth. You can see the very bed he stayed in. We were there last time. The lady's like, "Here's Dr. Mudd's medical book. You will here, check it out." Yeah. Like, oh, okay, well, really? Yeah. No gloves. No, here you go. Like, so you're actually getting firsthand. You're seeing a lot of cool stuff, and they tell a great story. And to your point, Dave, you're right. They don't shy away from the slave aspect. They bring it back to the slave house. They tell you the story. They talk about when Ned Spangler, who was part of the early part of the assassination, he came back and lived at the house. He died in the house, and he's buried not far away. And they tell you all the stories. So when you go to the Mudd place, you're hearing family lore, folklore sometimes being tracked, and it's great. It's a great aspect of history. It's one of the best museum visits I've ever been to, because it's so honest and so genuine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the same for me. I thought the tour was wonderful. The docent there, she was amazing. She gave an amazing tour. You could see the couch that Booth sat on or laid on, I guess, when he got there. The bed, the mirror was the big thing for me, to look into a mirror that John Wilkes Booth had likely looked into. And the thing I thought of, bad or not, but I thought of that scene in the documentary Killing Lincoln, where Booth was looking into a mirror when he was at the Mudd house, and you could see the fear in how his face changed from he'd been so arrogant looking before, and then all of a sudden he's looking in this mirror and he's realizing, like, oh, I might have made a huge mistake. Like, he's realizing that it's not going how he thought it would. And that's what I thought of when I looked in that mirror, was just that scene. Whether or not that actually happened, I don't know, but it just... and then the other thing too is they've got, because Mudd was imprisoned at Dry Tortugas for a number of years. They have kind of like from craft time, I guess you could say, the stuff he made.
Yeah.
Which he's very talented woodworker.
He had a lot of time to become talented.
He did, and he had like
3.5 years there.
He had like shell crafts and stuff. I was like, wow, this guy was quite the craftsman.
They couldn't make license plates back then, so you had to do something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the Mud House is one of my favorite, I think, gems in this, in that it's a great museum. It's great to go to it. And I love the Surratt House, but the Surratt House Museum, they don't have a lot of things because Mary, she's executed. And then, her daughter Anna, they don't have any income at this point. She has to sell off a bunch of their things. And so there's only maybe 2 or 3 things in the Surratt House that belong to the Surratt family. But meanwhile, the Mud House, because they continued living in there, and one of the grandsons did a very good job of finding all these things that had kind of spread out among the descendants, and was like, we're going to have this museum, we want it back together, convinced all of these different Mud descendants to donate it back to the museum. They really have this amazing collection of artifacts, like you said, Mary, not only from the stuff when Booth was there and they were living in it, but all this stuff they made when they were in prison, that they sent out home to friends, and just to see all these things, that are original and real. And this Mud made this, this frame or this shell box with his own hands while he was in prison. Is just, I think it's really cool to get that close to history. When you guys went last time, did they have a piece of Booth's splint on display?
Yep.
Because that was a new thing that the gentleman who owned that contacted me saying, I have a piece of Booth's splint. And I'm like, sure you do, buddy. I'm like, sure you do. Because, there's people out there who claim to have stuff. I'm like, okay. And then I started asking him questions and about like his family history. And then I was like, oh, no, your ancestor absolutely had the clout to get this. And I 100% believe you. The same person also has a check signed by John Wilkes Booth that they still have in their collection. And I was like, oh, okay, no, this is legit. And so it was great. They were like, we kind of want to figure out where it can go. So they're loaning it to the Dr. Mud House, which is, it's just really cool. It's very small. It's a very small piece, granted. It's like the size of like a dime or maybe a nickel or whatnot. It's very small, but still, like, that's a new addition to their collection that is just, it's really cool to see, to be like, this was applied here. And you guys used to have another splint up in Gettysburg for a while at the Gettysburg Museum of American History, but he traded it away for something else. I don't know. It went up for auction not too long ago, so you don't have it there anymore. So as far as I know, the only place you can see a piece of Booth splint, one of the 2 that we know exist, and the one with the best provenance, is at the Mud House.
Oh yeah, just so casual about it. The woman's like, yeah, here's this. You can check this out, and it's just really, really neat to see. So if you're into that part of history, it's like nothing else, because you're literally going into someone's house and you look. It's like stepping back in time, and they're so good about it. So we'll keep moving on with this. Now, you don't go to St. Mary's on your tour, do you?
We drive by, yeah. So after we're at Mud House, we do a full tour there again. We spend about an hour there, split the group up into usually thirds, upstairs, downstairs, the grounds, and then they go around. And then from there, so on our tour, what we're doing is then at Mud House, that's when everyone's going to get their box lunch, and they're going to eat it as we continue on our drive. So after we leave the Mud House, we actually drive down into Bryantown, which is still part of that kidnapping plot that when Booth first went down into the area, he took the stagecoach into Bryantown and stayed at the Bryantown Tavern. So we'll drive by that, and that's gotten some restoration work because it was kind of in disrepair, and the previous owner died a couple of years ago, so they're currently working on that. It's a private home. We drive by that, and then we drive to St. Mary's Catholic Church, which during the same time period is where Booth, when he visited in the fall of 1865, he went to St. Mary's Catholic Church, and that's where he met Dr. Mudd. And so we drive by there, and luckily for us, Dr. Mudd's grave in that cemetery is right near the front, so we can drive slowly by, and you can easily see Dr. Mudd's grave. So he's the only conspirator whose grave we're able to drive by on the tour, which is great to see. And then we continue on our way to Rich Hill, which was their next stop, on the escape. So we kind of break from the escape route a little bit there, because Booth and Harold did not go into Bryantown, because Harold had seen troopers in Bryantown when he and Dr. Mudd rode toward the town during the day, and then turned around and went back and told Booth, we need to skedaddle. That's when they go into the swamp, and we're not trying to take a bus into the swamp. We'll drive over the swamp and we'll point out, here's the swamp, here's the road that goes over the swamp, but we deviate a little bit because they went into the swamp. We're going to go around, see some sights, and then hook back up with their escape route as they head toward Rich Hill.
Yeah, so like you said, the 13th New York Cavalry, they're in Bryantown. And so what they're going to kind of go through the swamp. And if you go behind the mud house, you can see the path they took, which is really, really cool. You can
The Mud House occasionally has walking tours.
Yeah.
My friend Bob, who is one of the docents there, and he's one of my assistants for the tours. He I think he's the only one who does it because other people don't want to go out into the swamp. But a few times a season, he will schedule walking tours where they take you from behind the house. They walk you, and the property. That's the thing. The Mud House property cannot be beaten. Like, I love the Surratt House Tavern, but everything built up around that intersection.
Yeah.
There's a liquor store across the street and a gas station. It's like, the museum does a great job, but they're limited in their footprint. Mud House is that property. Those farmlands are still farmlands, and it's still what it looked like, in Dr. Mudd's time, and you just can't beat that view. And so, yeah, but those walking tours into the swamp I highly recommend to people. Like, keep an eye on the Dr. Mudd House website or social media, and when they offer those, do it, because it's really a really cool way to get. You don't get too dirty. They don't take you into the water, but they take you as close as you can without sinking in to show you this is what they were trying to cross, and this is why it took them forever to try to get over it.
Yeah, and they get through the swamp, and they end up stumbling onto Oswald Swan, his cabin, and he basically, I think they pay him about $12 to take him to the to Rich Hill. So they get there. Now it's Easter Sunday. It's April 16th, a Sunday now, and they're going to be guided by a free guy, Oswald Swan, and he was an entrepreneur too. I mean, he was an interesting fella. I mean, he was not going to be shaken down. He wanted his money.
Yes.
And he's gonna take him to Rich Hill. This is the home of the Confederate sympathizer and local Freemasonry, the fun lover, Colonel Samuel Cox. This is a guy who raised.
I didn't realize he was a Mason.
Oh yeah, you remember his grave before?
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's gonna.
I mean, you know all the Mason stuff. I trust you. I just didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he's got a big.
Oh, that's right. His grave has the Mason mark on it. Of course he was. That's right. Yeah.
So that's any case. So he was, but he also was a guy who rose the Charles County Mounting Volunteers. And this is back in 1859, before the war, Mary. And he was forced to disband by federal troops in June of 61. But he kept the Southern ties, obviously. And so he's going to get there. And, Cox is going to basically escort. And this is where we get to Rich Hill. And Rich Hill, we'll talk about this. It's being repaired right now. And so when we were there last time, we could peek in the window. We could see all the work being done. But when your tour goes, we'll be able to go in the area, right?
Correct. So I have given, not on purpose, but my tour has kind of set them. I mean, Rich Hill was in pretty bad shape for many years. It was a private home. It turned into a rental property, and then it was just kind of abandoned for a long time. And like a decade ago, it was donated to Charles County government, and they're like, "What are we going to do with it?" And I was part of the planning committee to be like, "Let's turn this into a museum," and not just because of the Booth connection, which of course is an interesting aspect. But Rich Hill also has this great Revolutionary War connection in that it was also the home of Dr. Gustavus Brown, who was a doctor who tended to George Washington on his deathbed. And in addition, one of Gustavus Brown's sisters, I forget her name, and I feel bad about it, but she married Thomas Stone, the Maryland signer of the Declaration of Independence. So you have these amazing revolution, and so the same building in which you have these revolutionary families is also then, becomes the home to, these Confederate sympathizers who then Booth is there. So that dual connection is really fascinating. So they're turning it into a museum, and they've been working on it, and it's a slow process with government and grants, and it was in really bad shape. But in March, when we go, it will be all ready to go. Exhibits, you can follow them on Facebook. Historic Rich Hill is their Facebook page. And right now it's just they finished the floors. I mean, the outside, the roof has been done for a couple of years, but they're finishing up the inside. And we're really excited to be the first tour group to go and be able to see this brand new completed museum that is really open. They have a rush deadline 2 weeks from now to make sure they're ready. And they want to do it for us because they want to have this thing all ready to go. And then after that, it's going to be open to the public on a regular basis. So even if you can't hit our tours, if you're in that area and you want to go visit this brand new museum, and we're excited to have that as part of this tour.
That's very cool. Because when we were there, they were still working on it. We could see stuff peeked in the windows, and we were like, "Is this place going to open?"
They even
again?
have the walls up, or was it still exposed brick?
It was.
No, the walls were up.
Yeah, the walls were up.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
I mean,
for a long time, it was still just the exposed brick.
I mean, obviously it looks a lot different now than it did, but you can still you can get a gist of it. But they're going to get there, and and then basically Cox is going to push them away. He's going to send with a guy named Franklin Roby. He's going to send them into the pine thicket, and the pine thicket is my favorite part of the whole story. It just is. he's going to contact Cox is going to contact his foster brother, a guy named Thomas Jones, and he's going to basically get him to get Booth and Harold across the Potomac, and that's how it's going to go. And Thomas Jones is a great story too, because a lot of the story that came out didn't come out till years later, when Jones kind of did a here's what happened later in life before he died, and he fills in a lot of the gaps with this. And he's an interesting fellow, Thomas Jones, as well. If you visit his grave, he's got that tree growing next to it, and things all twisted over. It's a tough spot for him right there. But it's great because this is the guy, and everybody knows this story. He's going to basically meet Booth and Harold in the pine thicket. They're going to have a unique whistle. They're going to whistle the whole thing. And he's going to bring them the newspapers. He's going to bring them supplies until he can safely get them across the river. But little do they know, they're going to spend the next 4 nights in these woods. And Mary, I know a guy who tried to stay in those woods, and he did it on YouTube.
He was much younger then and dumber and not at all experienced with any sort of reenacting, and did not really take into account what he was doing. But he was a dumb 26-year-old who was like, yeah, I can do it. Yes, I did that.
You did at least one night, though, right?
Oh, I did 2 nights there, and then a thunderstorm was coming, and I was like, I'm tapping out here. Especially after I was like, oh, this is much harder than it looks. I had no reenacting experience, but I was like, I'll be fine with just a saddle blanket and my clothes. I was freezing at night. I was dying of heat in the day. It really gives me a lot of respect for you reenactors who do these events, and I'm just like, I could never.
But I'll give you credit though, because you did it with the broken leg.
I didn't break my leg, but yes, I did.
You did it with a splint, and you did it.
I put a splint. I applied a splint. Wow. I had a crutch, and I was by myself. My girlfriend at the time came and brought me. She was my Thomas Jones and brought me food and newspapers, but I didn't have a David Harold with me, and so I was and trying to record everything, be a crazy man in the woods talking on his camera. But I mean, it's on YouTube. John Wilkes Booth in the Woods. Yeah. I'm still proud of it, even though it's a little silly. But if you want to see me go do that, I'm much
I think
younger,
that's awesome. It is
idiot.
And there's one point you can actually see his soul leaving his body towards the end. It's great. It's fantastic. It's really, really good. But
my favorite part is that I don't drink, and I had never had whiskey before, ever. And so I'm in the woods trying to be like Booth, who had whiskey. I have run out of water because it is hot, and I'm an idiot. And I'm like, well, let me just try some of this. And you can see on video that I'm like, I hate this. I don't like the taste of this. And now I'm far more thirsty than I ever was. So I learned a lot of life lessons.
You probably felt,
I have not had any whiskey since because I just can't.
I'm sure that's how Booth felt. I mean, he was in there reading those newspapers and finding out wow, I'm not the martyr that I thought I would be. It's
right. Yeah.
The news is not
and
good.
we do get to drive. So on the tour, we'll drive by where the pine thicket was, but as you both know, there's no pine thicket anymore. It wasn't really a pine thicket even after 10 years or so after Booth was there. It was already cleared for tobacco fields and whatnot. But we'll drive by and point out where the pine thicket is. And then where I did my little camp out was a little bit further on a property where Booth eventually crosses the Potomac from. So luckily we'll drive. I'm sorry, I've jumped ahead on our timeline, but yeah, that you get to experience. Luckily, we won't throw you into the pine thicket, but we'll point out where the pine thicket is.
But it is cool though. He's there for those nights, and you imagine what's going through his head at this point. He shot and killed the president. He thinks he's going to be a hero, and now he finds out that he's not the hero he thought he was going to be. And now he realizes he's a fugitive. Here's the horses rolling by. He's got to be quiet. He's got to kill his own horses with Harold, stick him in the swamp. He couldn't go to Ape Hanger's Bar and Grill around the corner in Belle Alton. So
is that where we went?
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Is it still open?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I swear, when I lived there, I thought it was shut down. I really didn't think it was still open.
That's an experience.
We went.
So.
One of the people on our tour was more of a wine and spritzer guy, so it was tough to get him in there with that place.
Right.
But it was like the barn in the Pee Wee Herman movie, down there. But it definitely, best we could tell, Mary, there's no evidence that he went into Ape Hangers, but he probably would have. I imagine he would.
Yeah, I would have loved to. But like you point out, Darren, that is when I think the reality, and Mary, you had hinted at this at Mud House. I do think it was, and at least Mud let him stay inside and let him rest inside. And then after that, he is constantly finding people who really don't want to help. And at Rich Hill, Cox is a Confederate sympathizer. As you said, he wanted to start his own militia to help. He was in favor of Maryland seceding. He wrote into the newspapers in favor of it. He kind of was in trouble with the Union because he kind of was drilling this local militia to help the secession, help Maryland secede. He was a Confederate 100% all the way, and yet Booth gets there, and even Cox is like, you can't hang out here, and then go hang out in the woods, and I'm going to send a guy. And Booth has had such a his life before this, he's been a famous actor who was wanted a little bit when he was younger, some money issues, but since he's been a famous actor, he's wanted for nothing. He's lived in the most elite hotels and like in really nice boarding houses, and so this is suddenly he is out in the woods in this area where he expected to be helped, and especially in Virginia when the same thing happens again. And this is when the reality hits that I have not calculated this all the right way. I thought I'd be a hero and everyone would be helping me, but now I am too toxic, and even the diehard Confederates are really hesitant to help me. And that's when you see this shift, I think, as the escape goes on. In those days in the woods, I know from personal experience, that humbles you like crazy. And Booth may have had that high of what I've done, even at Mud House, like, yeah, I did it, killed the tyrant, woo. But then when you are out in the woods and there are ticks all over you and you have to hide, I mean, no one was hunting me, but the fact of having to hide and stay quiet, no fires and stuff like that, that is when the reality of the situation, I think, hit him to where he's like, I don't know how this is going to go anymore. I was so cocky in what was going to happen and how I would be loved by everyone in this area and in Virginia, and that is not happening.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to his psyche at the time too, like how, his mindset going into the assassination, whatever he was going through, and it just, reality must have hit him hard.
Yeah, he truly thought I'm going to be a celebrated Brutus in the way that the classical, like, we think of Brutus now as this, traitor, horrible person, but he truly, from, acting in Julius Caesar, he thought, I am saving the Republic. I'm doing the noble thing, and that I'm going to be respected for it. But instead, he really became this, scorned Judas or Brutus that we think of today.
It's just amazing to think about it. And next time you do the stay in the woods, here's what we'll do.
I'm not doing it again.
We'll get some of my I'll get some of my
Dave is scarred for life.
I'll get some of my friends together. We'll hunt you down in the woods. We'll
great.
For you.
Thanks.
To add to it all. So,
but to make it realistic, I will just be somewhere in Southern Maryland. So good luck finding me. You don't have thousands and thousands of friends on horseback, so I think I could evade you.
I don't know. That's a challenge accepted. Who knows? We'll see. So anyway, so
next reenactment, we're hunting a man.
Yeah.
Good luck. That would be super cool, though.
That would be.
That would be cool, actually. So
I do not want to be the man who's being hunted, though. Sorry, I just don't.
I could do that.
But we'll hunt you down, Darren. Sounds good.
That'll be fun.
Oh, you'll find me. Post my Facebook location.
You'll be at Ape Hangers or whatever.
I'll be at the Ape Hangers happy hour. That's how I'll catch myself.
Yeah.
So obviously they want to get across, and Thomas Jones is waiting for the moment. He finds out that the troops are getting down to St. Mary's County to the south, and he knows that the time is kind of running out. So he figures, I better get to Booth and Harold and get them to cross that night. And basically, it ends up in a story where the three of them are going down this dark road, and there's stories about the dogs don't want to get them barking. They got to be really quiet to get down there because they're being hunted. And they're going to stop briefly at Jones' home, a place called Huckleberry, before proceeding to basically a 12-foot fishing boat that's hidden in the banks of the Potomac in a place called Dents Meadow. So let's talk about that location.
Yeah, and that's really people. I mean, I think the museum that people like the most on the tour is the Mud House, just because of the original artifacts. But when it comes to kind of a unique experience that this tour offers, is the ability to stand on the bluffs, of where, and look down at that little creek where the 12-foot flat bottom boat was hidden, and where Booth and Harold set off into the Potomac. And it's a private property that belongs to the Jesuits. Loyola on the Potomac is a private retreat. You can schedule, if you're Catholic, you can schedule retreats and take part in them. But for most of us, that's not a place we'd ever been or would be able to go. But we have access, so we would drive and see Thomas Jones's home of Huckleberry, which is also on the property, which still exists, and they use it for like visiting priests who come, and they get to live, and it's like an old little apartment like house where they stay, which is really cool. And then we drive and pretty much plant ourselves right on. They are very high bluffs, and so it was quite a challenge for Jones to get Booth and Harold down there. At a certain point, they couldn't even use the horse anymore that Jones had brought, just because they had to take down fences and it was too steep. And so essentially carrying Booth kind of down this very, steep path to where this little inlet is around Death's Meadow. And so we got to stand there, and you can look down, you can see where that inlet is. You have beautiful views of the Potomac in front of you, Matthias Point directly across. You can see Nanjemoy Creek, which is where they end up landing when they fail to cross to Virginia. And then you can even see far where they end up, getting Empachota Creek. And so it's a beautiful view, and you get this vista, and you really do see the river and how wide it is and how much of a struggle it was for them to row. Now, I wish we could go to Nanjemoy Creek, because as you know, they try to set across at Dents Meadow. They get turned around. Booth claims in his diary they get chased by gunboats until they wet and return to the Maryland shores or something like that. But they probably get a little lost. There were gunboats patrolling the Potomac. There is a flood tide that actually pushes you northward on the Potomac there, and so they end up in this other area of Charles County. But it is way out of the way, and it's also on private property that is, the closest road, you can't even see the water. And so, unfortunately, it's just not part of the tour, because it just doesn't make sense to lose so much time to not be able to see it. But you can, from where we stand at Dents Meadow, you can see that's where they go, and they're hanging out there, and they have to wait there for about 48 hours while Harold's hands recover from all the rowing before they set off again. So being at Dents Meadow, seeing the river is, I think, one of my favorite part of the tour, really, just to stand there and point out, here it is, this beautiful view, and this is this ominous river that really was a struggle for Lincoln's assassins.
It's a great area too. If you get down there, if you can make it down there yourself, you can see where Henry Woodland left the boat for him, and,
right.
and there's actually a picture of him. I'm sure you've seen it.
Oh yeah.
Taken around 1900, right around there, and he's standing there and exactly where he left the boat. And he wasn't there when they came, but it kind of ties it all together. And it's on private property again. Like I said before, as a guy who went to a Jesuit college, I'm not going to mess with them, because they're more New Testament.
They're nice people, I will say. If you want to do a retreat there, they're lovely people. They give us access to come in, which is always very nice, because they're doing private retreats throughout the year, and so we're very grateful that they allow us to come on for this little history thing. So we love the Jesuits. I'm sorry they traumatized you, but we appreciate it.
My whole point is, if you are going to do this tour on your own, and if you find the place, and you can go online, you can trace it. Don't go down there without their permission. I guess what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's for one, it's private property. Don't be that guy. But two, it's not safe unless you know where you're going, because it is very steep.
Yeah, it's pretty steep. I mean, I've never seen it before, but it's really steep, right?
You've got to want it. You really do.
Yes.
But if you think, okay, if you're just going to go, I'm going to take a walk down to the water, go see what Woodland left the boat. It sounds great. You can find pictures of it, but it's hard to get to, and it's not legal to get down there. So, but just be cool, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and we point out, we're on the bluff right next to it. You can see the inlet from where we stand, but also for liability reasons, it is steep. And so, like, even people who do retreats there, they have a few, like, Boy Scout made stairs to try to get you down, but it's not something that, even on the tour, I'm out of breath trying to come back up there when, I've gone there on my own. And so we're on the site, you can see it looking down, but like you said, it's a beautiful place, but there are bluffs that just, that are really high up and just fall into the Potomac River. And so for our purposes, we get to see everything, but without any of the danger. And we're very grateful to be allowed on that private property to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely cool. So I guess the point is, you'll still be able to see most of it. You'll see most of the stuff. You got a good gist of it.
More so than you would. I mean, the Civil War Trail sign for Dents Meadow isn't anywhere near actual Dents Meadow. It's like it's right on the water. Civil War Trail side is nice, and it's right on the water, and you get a great view of Captain Billy's Crab House, which is right there.
Yes.
But it's not where the site was. You got to go a couple miles up the road to actually be there. And again, it's on private property. So that's the benefit of doing a tour like this, is that it's not just close to. It's here. Like, I'll point to you. This is exactly where it is. And even a place like the Pine Thicket, I'll point you that house down that street right there. That's where the stuff stump was, that's where they hid out. Granted, they probably moved around a little bit in the pine thicket,
Yeah.
but originally that's where they met Jones, like right there in that house. And so that's what's, some places you get to stand there, you get to stand at Dr. Mudd's and stuff like that. But even just being like, no, I can tell you right here, exactly here, it's such an experience that you can't get anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. So they're gonna, as we were talking about, the plan is, Jones is going to recommend basically to follow the compass heading, to Matthias Point, and they're going to try to get to Elizabeth Quisenberry's house. It's in present day Dahlgren, Virginia, if you know the area. And Booth's going to thank him for the trip, and they're going to push off this big see you later, heroes goodbye type thing. But to your point, they get themselves in a tough time, and they end up 9 miles up the river. It just for different reasons they end up, and they're going to end up basically going to the house of an Indian town to a guy named John Hughes. This is before he made Breakfast Club movie, way before. Okay, so just in case
it's all coming back full circle to the name of our podcast now.
Yeah, it's funny how it all works out.
That's right. That's right.
But Booth, this is what Booth's gonna be writing in his diary, how he's hunted like a dog and all this other stuff he's gonna do, common cutthroat. But they're gonna stay in Indiantown Farm for the day, and Booth and Harold are gonna basically start off on that second attempt that Dave was kind of talking about, and they're gonna launch from Pope's Creek, which I think about 3 miles or so from the present day of 301, right around there, give or take, in Newburgh. And I think you have some personal history there, if I remember correctly. Don't you?
I mean,
didn't you get engaged there?
Oh yes, I did.
It's
Don't
not.
tell my wife I forgot.
How do you not remember? How do I know that and you don't?
I would, well, just when you describe Pope's Creek, I don't, yes. My wife, I proposed to my wife at Dents Meadow, at the place where they set off. Now, to be fair, we were secretly married already at the time, so it was more of a public proposal to everyone else, because we got hitched, we eloped after 2 months, but didn't tell our families because we knew they wouldn't be thrilled about it. And then, so we had to go through the whole engagement thing, and then planning a wedding a year later and surprise them. But yes, we did, sorry. It was a wonderful memory. Loved it, yes. But that is where I proposed to my wife.
Obviously, it's very front of mind. So obviously, it is.
Because you were talking, I got confused. You were talking about Nanjemoy Creek, and then you jumped back to Pope's Creek, and so I was a little confused.
Around a little bit.
Yeah,
but just like that engagement, their attempt at West Virginia succeeded this time.
That's right.
See how that's tie that whole thing together right there. So now we're at the Sunday, April 23rd, and they're going to go across the Potomac to Virginia. They're going to land at the mouth of Gamble Creek. And they're going to seek out the widow, Elizabeth Rousby Green Quisenberry. And she's a Southern...
Bonus points for both middle names.
You got it.
Way to go.
And she's going to be a Southern sympathizer who's referred to them by Thomas Jones. And basically, let's talk about that whole thing, because I know that's part of one of the stops, too.
Absolutely. So at that point, we have to get ourselves into Virginia, and obviously we're not in duck boats or anything like that. So we kind of we have to lose the trail a little bit there in order to get on the road. We get into 301. We cross the Harry Nice Bridge, which I understand has been recently. I knew they were working on it for several years. Was it nice? You've been over that bridge more recently than I have.
It's very wide.
It used to be just one lane, one way, the other. Yeah. The traffic would back up for crazy, and it was a little terrifying. So I'm glad that it's new and nice. So we're gonna hop our way into Dahlgren. Now we are gonna make a stop again because it's there's a bathroom, there's a toilet on the bus, but that's easier said than done for a lot of us on a moving vehicle. So we're gonna stop. There's a nice little kind of a visitor center, the Dahlgren Heritage Museum, which is located right there once you get into Dahlgren, right into King George there. And so we're gonna use their bathrooms, and they're nice people there. So we'll do a little bathroom break, and then we'll continue on. And yes, we'll make our way by land to Mrs. Quisenberry's former cottage, which is now a marina. So the house has kind of been consumed by a larger structure, and there's a marina behind it. And so we'll drive by there. Now, they have recently, I don't know if that's a recommended stop for a place to eat for you guys.
Around the back, they got that restaurant.
Yeah, they've started a whole new restaurant, which I've eaten there, and it's lovely. And so they got good food there, and then you can go even further down to the water, and that's where they put the Civil War Trail sign. Now we're gonna have to see what the bus with all the people with the boats. This first tour, we're going to see how safe it is for us to try to take the bus down right to the water and turn around. There may not be the clearance that we need to do that. And so I don't, again, not risking anything, or if people have a lot of boats in the water, then we don't have the turnaround area for a big bus. But we will go right to where Mrs. Cusenberry's house is, and we will see that, point that out, and be like, okay, they landed at Gambo Creek, which we can't go to because that is on the military base there at Dahlgren Naval Station. So that's where Booth hung out in the rowboat, where Harold walked to Miss Cusenberry's and then kind of chatted with her, and she was like, just like everyone else, I'll send you some food and maybe some men who will help you. And then he goes back to the boat and we'll go from there. But yeah, so we will go see the Mrs. Cusenberry cottage and kind of, again, point out this is where this interaction happened. Booth was never here, but Harold was trying to find some help here because they had no more horses. They crossed the river. The horses were dead in the swamp. And so now they are really stuck on, the kindness of others. And again, they're finding the promised land of Virginia is just as hesitant to help them as Southern Maryland became.
I can't imagine hobbling around on with just one leg working either. Even
it's not like they could walk very far.
That no.
and he's not used to struggling. I mean, he's used to living the dream. He's gonna, and then he'll be introduced with Harold to Thomas Harbin and Joseph Baden, who are going to basically be Cusenberry's kind of the people who kind of help him out. Harbin's actually Thomas Jones' brother-in-law. And so that's kind of that's kind of the connection that they're going to basically have. So Jones knew by sending them to her that she at least put him in touch with people that could help Booth and Harold once they did make it to Virginia. And
that's where people get that whole Confederate, there is this Confederate underground connection, which is legitimate. Like we talked about before, the connections to Booth, and was he a Confederate spy? Was he acting on the orders of the Confederacy? I personally don't feel that evidence exists to really support those type of theories. But there are these connections to this underground system because these people we talked about, Cox definitely was doing things. And even Dr. Mudd is accused of, having these. There were a lot of people in these areas, especially on the border between Maryland, Virginia, who sided with the Confederacy and helped out in these secretive ways. But they had some organization that Jones knew Miss Cusenberry because they would help smuggle Confederate mail. But it's how legitimate it was and how big it wasn't. One big organized Confederate Secret Service, as some people like to do it. It was these small groups working on behalf of the cause they believed in, who had these connections, and sometimes these connections to others. And so you have people like Harbin and Baden who were involved in this mail and smuggling trade, who are assisting Booth. But even they, if this was the Confederacy's behind it, they would have given Booth and Harold far more help. But just like everyone else, they're going to be like, okay, we're going to lead you to a farmer, and now he can take you to the next way. We don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. So they knew the writing was on the wall, and that they want as little to do with him as possible.
Yeah, and her house was part of the mail line. But again, this is basically at the end of the war now. Who knows if early in the war it was more established. By then, it was probably more laid back. They're going to end up meeting a guy named William Bryant, and basically Bryant's going to basically bring Booth and Harold to Claydell at this point, which is another great stop. This is home of the Southern sympathizer, Dr. Richard Stewart, and we visited his house not last time. And so I guess why don't we talk about that, Dave, about as far as that part of the tour.
Yeah, and this is another, I guess, so we have the favorite museum is usually Dr. Mudd's. The favorite, just overall stop is that view at Dents Meadow. But so many people love our visit to Claydell because it's a private home, and the owners just allow us to bring a busload of people into their house.
That's awesome.
The couple is named the Parkers. They bought, it was, the house was in rough shape. The previous owners also, for the Surratt Society tours for many years allowed people to come in, but the lady who owned it, she died without a will, and the house fell into disrepair. It was in a real bad spot, and then the Parkers who own it now bought it, and they've restored it. They live there, and they just let us in, and they give us a little private tour of their home and all the work they've done to restore this amazing home. We spent probably more time in Claydell than Booth and Harold did, because same thing as Dr. Stewart lets them in for a meal, and even Booth is like, I need medical assistance, and Dr. Stewart's like, too bad. And, I point this out because people are like, well, Dr. Mudd was just fulfilling his Hippocratic Oath. I'm like, well, here's Dr. Joseph Stewart, who also would have had Hippocratic Oath and also was probably more of a Confederate sympathizer because he was related to the Lees. His wife was related to the Lees, and General Lee's daughters spent the early months of the war at Claydell. And so it's not like he didn't believe in the cause, but, he also knew you are incredibly dangerous. I cannot have you in my home, and I'm not going to help you. I don't care if your leg's broken, you need medical attention. But by then, of course, Mudd maybe didn't know about it, but by then Stewart knew. Everyone knew at this point. Booth was ahead of the news for a lot of it, but those 4.5 days in the pine thicket, the news spreads into even these areas of the Confederacy, especially someone as well connected as Stewart. And so, they get a meal and then they are told, get out of here. And that's when they just walk across kind of the fields and they kick out a black family from their cabin named the Lucases.
Right.
They pretty much, Booth is fed up, especially with this rich Southern gentleman of Dr. Stewart, who pretty much just gives them no help at all. He's incredibly offended by it. And so by knife point, using the same knife that Booth used to stab Major Rathbone at Ford's Theater, he scares the Lucases out of their cabin. Yeah. And they sleep outside the night, and Booth and Harold sleep inside, and still are trying to figure out, what are we going to do now? Dr. Stewart, we have no horses. We are trapped here in King George. And so in our tour, we visit Claydell, we walk inside. Now the Lucas cabin doesn't exist anymore, like a lot of, this former slave cabins and things like that. And the Lucases were a free family, but it doesn't exist. But I know where the house was, where the cabin is, and point out it was right about here is where the cabin was that they slept. And so after we tour Claydell, we drive back out, we point out where the Lucas cabin was, and then we continue on the road.
Yeah, and so he basically tells Brian to get these guys out of here, and it's and so Lucas's son ends up kind of taking him around. But it's funny because because it's by then is you're starting to see the sightings coming up, the Booth sightings, because the hunt's on. Sergeant Bagley, one of my favorite stories about this story. He's at Mount Millstone Landing. This is about 9:00. He's going to report that Booth's been spotted, Mary. Turns out, what was it? A guy in women's clothes.
Oh. What the? Yes.
And we're not here to judge, but that's who it turned out to be. It was not.
Did he decide to be a drag queen afterwards?
No,
why not?
They saw this sketchy guy. They thought it was him. They got him, and it turned out it was just a guy dressed up as a woman.
So random.
It's a little story.
And that's one big thing that I'm trying to put more into this tour than maybe I didn't do as much before, is kind of add more of this. The tour is Booth's escape, absolutely, but I do want it to be like, we are on the manhunt for him. Let's talk about kind of the people who are looking for him. Obviously, the 16th New York and Boston Corbett, they get their due because they find him. But like you said, there are all these people searching all over the place for him. All these civilians, these just people who just decide, I'm now a detective. Look at me, I'm a detective, and start looking for him. And these interesting stories that we are part of this manhunt. We're not just retracing Booth's escape, but we are actively hunting him in the same way that they did. Like even places like the Surratt House, obviously Booth and Harold stopped there, but then after the fact, they use the Surratt Tavern as kind of a headquarters. Eventually Lloyd tells them, he takes a while to tell them that he saw them before he lies about it, which is, we've talked about that before with the conspirators, but they own the Surratt Tavern and use it as a base of operations looking for people. And there's a similar account too, that there's someone they think, and they don't know where Booth is, they still think he's in the area even after he's made his way into Virginia. There's all these false sightings, all around too, that they still think maybe he went north, maybe he's up in, spotted up in Baltimore, maybe he's going back to his hometown or stuff like that. So being able to kind of tell these stories too of these manhunters and everyone who's searching for him, and also just the lesser known figures. So one thing, I don't have one with me, but I have badges, of course. We got to make sure we keep our cats together on the tour. We don't lose anyone. So you got your lanyard with badges, and I have put the smaller figures of this story on each badge.
That is so cool.
I don't have Booth on there. I don't have the conspirators. I don't have Lincoln, but I have different people. Some of them are part of the manhunt. Some of them are some of the figures we talked about, like Henry Woodland, who hid the boat that Booth and Harold used, but had no idea why he was hiding it. He was not told by Jones why to go out fishing. And, some of the figures who were just interacting with Booth and Harold or in the story, just to be like, we're going to tell these kind of smaller stories because those are fascinating. I don't have one for Cobb. I should have made one for Silas Cobb to say about him drowning. But yeah, a lot of these people like Lloyd's sister-in-law Emma Offutt, who had been kind of around when Mary Surratt came and said to have the shooting irons ready, but didn't hear that conversation, like some people who are part of the conspiracy period. So it's trying to bring out more stories than you normally do. Because, yeah, it's about Booth, it's about the bad guys, but also there's so many more people involved in this story that deserve recognition.
I agree. There's so many different people involved. I think that's really cool you're doing that with the badges that you're giving people to give them that kind of connection to it. The other thing I was thinking that is happening during this manhunt is there is money attached to it. So all of a sudden Booth is going to be seen everywhere. So it's like, oh, if I've got a chance at that money, I am going to like, when it's that much money. And I think it was like it was the first time a wanted poster, I think, was made by the government, right? Or like a poster of that.
I've always had a hard time researching that because it's such a niche, like specific, but it definitely, I think it's the first time that they attached real photographs to a wanted poster. I think it is the first time they did that.
Yeah. The only time
everyone wanted it.
The only time I ever heard that it was the first time was on Pawn Stars when the guy brought it in and he said, "This is the
oh, that's a fake."
So that's
that guy was so angry.
Hey, are you gonna say Rick Harris is wrong? I don't know.
The best I can do is $5. I'm sorry. It's the best I can do. Yeah.
But you're right though. I mean, you got characters, guys like poor Charlie Lucas. We'll get to him in here in a second. He's a perfect example of that. He's William Lucas's kid. He's going to take him on a wagon down across the Rappahannock River, and so he's kind of one of these nameless and faceless guys who's part of this story, who now is taking them in his wagon, putting his own life in jeopardy as he heads down. And they're going to get to that ferry crossing, and they're gonna meet the gang of three, right? Mortimer Ruggles, Alice Long, Bainbridge, and of course the great Willie Jett, all claiming to be Mosby's Rangers, right? And so that's another place that you go ahead and you visit when you do these things.
Absolutely. So we, after leaving, kind of the Lucas cabin site, we drive through. So Port Conway on the Rappahannock River on the King George side, there's really not much there nowadays. Even then, it was a small fishing village. There was a few things going on. But what I will point out when we drive by is that it's Belgrove Plantation. It's now a bed and breakfast. It is where President James Madison was born. Not the same building. It was a fire, but it is got a really cool, again, this founding father connection. But during the manhunt, the 16th New York, they make landfall following the trail after the fact, but they make their way to Belgrove, and one of the detectives there, Everton Conger, he sleeps on like a sofa in the hallway while the rest of the guys make their way to Port Conway and start talking to people and start piecing together, oh, there was a guy with a broken leg here about 24 hours earlier, and those 3 Confederate soldiers, and one of my named badges is for Betty Rollins, who it is her husband who Booth and Harold talked to about, hey, can you take us across the river? And he's like, oh, I got some fishing to do right now. I'll tell the ferryman that you're ready, and maybe I'll take you, when I'm done. And she recognizes Willie Jett and is the one who pretty much tells the authorities 24 hours later, oh, yeah, I know Willie Jett. He was one of the guys here, and Willie Jett is dating a girl in Bowling Green. You should go hunt him down. So again, she just happened to know the one Confederate soldier who was interacting with Booth, and that leads, again, it's just these small people who just, oh yeah, Willie Jett, he's dating the Goldman girl down in Bowling Green. Go find him. And that leads to Booth's capture. And so, like, you don't really hear about Betty Rollins very often, but she's the reason. If she knew, she put it together, and if she wasn't there and didn't observe them, would have taken much longer to find Booth.
That's what gets you in history. You don't think about these things. That's why it's impossible even back then to pull something like this off. It really is. So many, especially when you're Davy Harold and you're telling Jett what you did, who he is, and that's when they start running their mouth a little bit. They
and even then, it's just Davy. Booth is, it's such a change from, at Surratt Tavern when Booth is the one who brags about we've killed the president and probably the Secretary of State, and then at Port Conway there with the Confederates, Davy's the one is like, yonder is the assassinator of the president.
Booth is probably like, dude, like.
Yeah, Booth is like, when Jett is like, ooh, tell me about it. Booth says it's nothing to brag about. He is a completely broken man after all these days on the run, and realizes that, maybe there'll be more people further south, but he is now just broken and being like, I just got to keep going because I'm not sure what to do other than that.
Yeah, and Jett's trying to find a place for these guys now. They try to stop at a place with a guy named Randolph Payton. initially, but he's got two unmarried sisters at home, and that ain't going to work.
But he's not home. That's the issue. Is Sarah Jane Payton, his sister, answers the door, and at first she's kind of in favor because Willie Jett is the one who's like, and this is in Port Royal, so we cross over the Rappahannock River. There's a bridge now, and we drive into Port Royal, which is an amazing like colonial little town. And in fact, I was on the like historical society board for a year when I lived out there. I love Port Royal. They're great. And it was going to be when the Rockefellers were looking for a city, like a colonial city to put a bunch of money in and try to restore. They eventually went with Williamsburg, but Port Royal was on the short list to have become kind of the Williamsburg. And so they have all these amazing old houses from colonial times. And so we'll drive by what is the Brockenborough Peyton House. We more think of the Peyton side of it, which was later. But it unfortunately, it's one of those, it's in rough shape. It is, it still stands, but I truly don't know how many years it will stay there. It's one of those situations where the people who own it are not taking care of it. They know there's a historical connection and that they want someone to come around and pay for everything to fix it. And they're just letting it fall into disrepair. So I do think maybe within the next decade, that house won't be there anymore. It's just really I think, and you guys saw it more recently, I think, than me, that how rough, and it's rougher and rougher every time I go. And so it's sad to see, but that's why, I want people to come and see it while you can. It's still standing, and it will, I wish something could be done, and maybe there will be, but, we will drive by and see the house that Booth was kind of turned away from. At first, Willie Jett was like, will you take care of, they lied at this point, saying that Booth is a wounded Confederate soldier. And so before she sees him, Sarah Jane Payton is like, well, of course, I'm happy to entertain and help, a member of the cause. And then Booth, is shown to her. This man has been hiding out in woods until, for multiple days, where has been wearing the same clothes, is very worse for wear. He's got a broken leg. He smells. And even though she never admits to having suspicions that, he's he might be Lincoln's assassin, she immediately changes her mind. It is like, well, actually, as you said, it wouldn't be right for me as an unmarried woman without my brother at home to take care of him. Yeah. So you should check somewhere else. And they look around in Port Royal, and then eventually the idea either from Willie Jett or Sarah Jane Payton is like, go to the Garrett farm 2 miles down the road. The Garretts have 2 sons who fought in the Confederate Army. They have a sizable farm. I'm sure they'll take you in. So we get to we'll drive by through beautiful Port Royal, and I wish we could stop at their museum, the Port Royal Museum of American History. They have some artifacts relating to Booth's time there, including like a hinge from the barn at the Garrett farm, and they have some bricks. And they have just some artifacts. It's a great, but again, our day is so long, we just don't have the time to stop inside. We just got to keep going. We got to make it to the site. Yeah. We got to go.
So Jett they end up going to the Garrett farm, and, Jett himself is going to go back to Bowling Green. He's going to go to the Star Hotel, which unfortunately is not there anymore. And like you mentioned before, Jett, he's been spending time, as they say, night putting with the Zora Goldman, as they say, right? And so he's been staying with she happened to be the daughter of the hotel owner. And that then, but now, so Booth is over at the Garrett farm. He's telling him his name is John W. Boyd, and this is where you see a lot of the alibis come, all that stuff later on. It goes forward. He's a former Confederate soldier. And then David's going to proceed to the next town, Bowling Green, again with the soldiers. In Booth, Booth is going to stay at the night at the farmhouse. So now you get to Tuesday, April 25th. So it's almost the end of the road now. And you got to put yourself in Booth's situation. He's finally relaxing. He's sleeping in a house. He thinks he's safe. He's eating breakfast. He's playing with the Garrett children. You probably feel like maybe this last 11 days of misery has finally paid off a little bit. But this is when it all kind of falls apart, though. Right, Harold's going to return from Bowling Green in the afternoon. He's going to be followed by Ruggles and Absalom Bainbridge, and then it's as the whole thing kind of continues on, they're going to report that there's Union cavalry approaching, and it's going to cause Booth to flee and go in the woods. And this is when they get a little scared at the Garrett family, and so the thing that he's starting to realize now that maybe he's not as safe as he thought he was.
Mm.
Right. Yeah, he really, yeah, as you said, Garrett Farm, they lied, of course, who Booth was. And so
Yeah.
they invited him in. They believed him to be a wounded Confederate veteran, even though he, and when Davy comes back, particularly on that day, he also starts lying and saying that he was a Confederate veteran. And they kind of suspect he talks a lot more than Booth does. And so there is this uncertainty about this guy. But then, yeah, when the 16th New York, they were really sent into Virginia on a wild goose chase where they're like, oh, Booth's been sighting, he's already crossed the Potomac. The majority of the War Department and Edwin Stanton and the soldiers in Maryland still thought he was hiding maybe in the woods, there. They really didn't think he has crossed yet. We've really been blockading this river. And so the 16th New Yorker sent in on a false report, that Booth has been seen, but they end up getting on his trail, and when they talk to Betty Rollins, and then they shoot their way to Bowling Green. They ride right past the Garrett Farm. And by then, Booth is hidden in the woods because Ruggles and Bainbridge have seen them when they were trying to cross the river. And so that is what changes everything for the Garretts, where they're suddenly like, why are you afraid of the Union cavalry? Like, the war's over. Like, I'm a Confederate soldier, Jack Garrett says. He's like, why are you afraid?
Yeah, it's like you're with a friend or somebody, and all of a sudden a police siren goes by, and the guy runs and takes off.
It's like, that's
what
a
the hell's
red
going
flag.
on?
It's like,
Right?
oh.
Yes.
Rich's son, his name is Jack, is going to be like, all right, what the heck's going on here? And it becomes a little bit like, all right, something up at the foot of the Circle K here. Something's not right, right?
Yeah.
And they become obviously suspicious of these two guys. So they're told, obviously, you're going to leave the house, you're going to go sleep in the tobacco barn. And everybody kind of knows the story at this point. If you have to go rehash the whole story of what happens with everything. But suffice it to say, the Garrett Farm is not there anymore. And so you're limited to what you can see when you go visit nowadays.
Yeah, and it is a shame because so many of these things still exist. Amazingly, after 161 years, that so many of these things are still standing. These buildings, these sites, largely untouched. But the area where the Garrett Farm was, the house itself collapsed in the 1920s, and then maybe the 30s.
I think it was the 30s. I think it was the 30s.
I think you're right. It was like 37. It was 37. I think it was 37, 38. And so the house collapsed, which is fine because we're missing some houses in other places. But then the real issue is that during World War II, back to Fort A.P. Hill now, but different A.P. Hill, was made to, as a training ground for the Army, and they buy like 50,000 acres of Caroline County, including where the Garrett Farm was. So even if the house had stayed standing, it was then going to be taken over and knocked down. They just took over this entire area and built, this training area for the Army during World War II. And so we're both fortunate. It's unfortunate that that's where it was built because now it's an Army base and very difficult to get on. The one saving grace for us is where they decided to put the road. The Route 301 when they made it, cut right through the Garrett Farm. And so the northbound and the southbound lanes actually cut in a way that the Garrett house once stood in the median in the middle of the highway.
Yep.
And so you can get as close as if it was anywhere else. If the road was anywhere else, you wouldn't get anywhere close to the Garrett farmhouse because it's in the middle of the Army base and they would never let you on. And there's areas of that base which are like used for artillery and you just can't visit because it's dangerous. There's unexploded ordnance and stuff like that. So we're fortunate that as we drive south on 301 and then turn around and head north, we are driving on the part of the Garrett Farm, and we are within a stone's throw distance of where the barn was that Booth was, shot in, and then the house that was on the median strip where he eventually died. So for our tour, we go into the median strip. There is a turnaround area in the median strip, so we hang out for a little bit in that area. We don't get out of the bus, unfortunately. In once upon a time, you could walk into the median, but that is no longer the case, and there's no trespassing signs, and the Army is not a fan of it and stuff like that. So I understand, it's sad, but I also, and there's a prison down the road, like there's reasons why you're not supposed to go there, but we kind of hang out in the turnaround, talk about it, and then as we drive north, there is the highway marker, the Assassin's End marker, which I wrote, that is located there, and so we will see it. But yeah, it is sad that the end of the tour, we don't actually get to go and stand where Booth died, but you get real close to it. And then we take a break right up the road at Horns, which is the gas station restaurant right there, where we all get snacks and take a bathroom break, and then continue on our way back north. And I kind of fill in the rest of the story, talking about the other conspirators, the trial. Sometimes I don't even kill Booth off until we've left Horns, so that, as I tell them, you get ice cream. Now it's time for Booth to get his just desserts.
Yeah.
And we tell an in-depth story. That's my joke there.
That's a good way to do
let's
it.
kill off Booth. Yeah. Because there's so much to tell in those last couple days. And with the 16th New York, usually we visit the site and I say this is where he was killed, but I don't really kill him off until we're heading north, just so that I get more time to tell that story.
That's very cool. Do you mention Edward Doherty? I gotta ask.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome.
I mean, he's my favorite Canadian.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I mean, my second favorite Canadian. You're my favorite Canadian. But yeah, Doherty, I mean, there's all this stuff that happened after the fact, about who was in charge of the 16th New York, because Doherty was absolutely the commander of the troopers, but then you have, L.B. Baker and you have Everton Conger, who were kind of these detectives who were along with it, and they're all fighting because, as you said earlier, Mary, everyone wants as much money as they can get. So they will perjure, all three of them will lie about who's in charge because they all want the money. But there's no doubt that Doherty was in charge of the troopers, and I believe he was in charge of the whole thing. I come down on that. Doherty was in charge. Like Baker, and Conger had some authority, but they couldn't control the men. It's Doherty's men. Like it's his detachment of troops. But yeah, Doherty's great. And I only recently learned from one of your other followers, Colin, the one who's in Ireland.
Yeah, Colleen. Yeah.
Yeah, Colleen, thank you. I saw it on Facebook. The good thing about now having this tour business is being on Facebook. One of the things I loved is that picture he sent that he posted the other day of the bar in Ireland where Doherty, there's a bust of Doherty there, and a bust of Boston Corbett in this bar there. And I was like, there's like a Lincoln room in some bar near Sligo, Ireland, which is where Doherty his family hailed from. And so, yeah. And I love that Doherty has he has two gravestones, because there's the family stone in Sligo, I think it's Sligo, Ireland, that has his name on it, and it says he's the avenger of President Lincoln. And then at Arlington National Cemetery, he's got a very nice stone that again says that he was in charge of the detachment that went to John Wilkes Booth. One of the few graves that mention the Lincoln assassination, which I'm always excited to find, and he deserves it too. So yeah, he is one of my badges. Is Doherty.
Oh, awesome.
And then the other one from the 16th New York is Luther Baker's horse. Because it later Baker went on the lecture circuit talking about how he's the one who led the cavalry, whatever, but that he was there when Booth died. And then his horse had a role in presenting. I mean, the horse lived until the 1880s, and now Buckskin is the name of Luther Baker's horse. And there is a little introduction thing that was written of Buckskin talking about how he and his owner helped track down Booth, and then Buckskin was stuffed after the fact, and for many years was on display in a agricultural museum in Michigan until his taxidermy kind of deteriorated beyond repair, and they had to get rid of him. But for a while, Buckskin, the horse that helped hunt down Booth, was in the agricultural college in University of Michigan where Baker lived. And so Buckskin is one of my badges. He's the only non-human participant that I'm like, well, I gotta have a picture of Buckskin and talk about him. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I think Jack Garris had his gravestone references the assassination, if I remember correctly. It says what led him to the tobacco barn. I've seen it. I forget exact verbiage, but one of the Garrett kids mentions the assassination.
Well, so most of the Garretts are buried at Enon Baptist Church over on the other side of where Fort Acre Hill was built. Right. And they only have, they're not marked. Like Richard Garrett, what happened is a parishioner there in the 1980s put down rectangular tin markers where they just stamped on it, the name and date. That is right. Because they thought Jack owned the barn as opposed to the father, because the parishioner didn't know. So you're right. Jack's one says something about owning the barn or something like that, even though it was his dad. But you are correct. That's right. Jack's little tin marker.
He's got a little mark. But I think that's the only ones. We visited just about all of them. The ones
There's
that,
I like Emmerich Hansel's grave in Congressional Cemetery says about he was stabbed by Lewis Powell. His grandson put that up, and so his actually mentions it. And there I'm trying to think. There's a couple people from the 16th New York, some of the soldiers. There's one which is very funny because this happens a lot too. People claim to be there who that weren't, and then so there's one guy I forget where he's buried. He might be buried in Michigan, where it's like he was a member of the 16th New York that tracked Booth. He was not. Like he is one of many people who claimed it, but no, he was not. He was a member of the 16th New York, but he wasn't part of that small detachment that found Booth. But a lot of, as we know, there's a lot of claimants who, because of either they don't remember or they're lying outright. That this happened a lot.
Yeah.
But then, after we hit the Garrett Farm side, we then drive back north, and it's still from there, as you guys know, to get back up to where we started. It's about another hour and a half drive just to get to where you started again. Yep. And so gives me plenty of time to talk. And then, so part of for our tour, of course, I have this is my draft version, but little, booklet that shows them where we're going and the dates that Booth and Harold were there. But then part of that for completing the tour and for finding Booth is that everyone's going to get a sticker that looks like this, which is actually based on the Lincoln Avengers medal.
Avengers, yeah.
That's awesome.
So now Doherty got one of these. Yeah. But sadly, it was only for officers of the 16th New York. Oh. So like Corbett and the privates and the sergeants who were there didn't get one of these, but Doherty gets one, and other members of the higher echelon of the 16th New York who had nothing to do with the escape get these. But this is actually Doherty's, and so it is gold and it had diamonds, and it actually sold at auction a few years ago. So I got a really nice picture of it. And so as a way of marking that we have tracked down Booth together, that you are a member, and that's what the LA stands for, not Los Angeles, but as a Lincoln Avenger. So all the participants will get one of these for kind of completing the tour, and that we hunted Booth down successfully.
That's awesome. That is so cool.
So, Mayor, if you miss the bus, you get left behind. You don't get a sticker.
Nope.
No, you didn't track them down. And I've been really fortunate. These first 3 tours we're doing this spring, I have an author friend of mine who is coming on each one. And so we have, what I love is that they've all volunteered for me to raffle off for some of their books to participants on the tour. Oh, cool. So the badges have numbers on them. I'm going to have them pick a number, 1 to 50, and whoever gets it, you get a free copy of all of it. Is recent scholarship on the Lincoln assassination. There's a book about Osborne Oldroyd, who was a big Lincoln collector, and he's the one who did in 1900. Darren, you talked about that photograph of Henry Woodland at the spot where Booth set across. Osborne Oldroyd is the one who traveled there, took that photograph, and wrote about it. And he was a big Lincoln guy. So I have an author named Al Hunter who has recently completed a really big biography about Oldroyd. We're going to give away. He also is an expert on the Peterson House, because that is Oldroyd ends up living there and running it as a museum before it becomes part of the Department of the Interior. And so we're going to grade those books on the March tour. On the April 18th tour, we have Frank Gorman, who was the lawyer who represented Greenmount Cemetery during the exhumation trial in 1995, when the proponents of the Bates theory tried to get Booth exhumed based on this crazy conspiracy theory, and Mr. Gorman was the lawyer for Greenmount who said no, and brought in people like Mike Kaufman and these other, historians to testify that there's no legitimate reason to dig up Booth. It is very clear he is buried here. No other man was killed at the Garrett Farm. It was Booth. And just last year, Frank published a book. It's now been 30 years since that trial. And so he published a book about the trial, the history of it, and why Finest Bates is a complete fraud. So we have him coming out on the 18th. We're going to give away copies of his book. And then on the 19th, we have author Renette Chilton, who has written 2 books about Lincoln's clothing. About the Brooks Brothers overcoat that he was wearing when he was assassinated, and the story of how it kind of, it's a really interesting story about the provenance behind it, and how we know, Lincoln wore this coat when he gave his second inaugural address, and so it was an inauguration coat, and it has this beautiful "One Country, One Destiny" lining in it, and it used to be on display at Ford's. So she wrote one book about that in 2020, and then just this year she's released a book about the frock coats, the debate over which undercoat Lincoln was wearing when he was shot, because he was wearing the big coat because it was cold, but he also had a frock coat, and there are 3 different coats that exist in different collections that have been claimed to be the one, and she did a wonderful job diving into what's the provenance behind all of these things and which coat is it and the story behind them. So she's going to be on our April 19th tour, and where we give away copies of her book. So that just happened to work out. I would love to have authors like that for all the tours. At the very least, though, we are going to make giving away books a part of the tour, no matter what. If I can get the authors there to sign them, perfect. But that's a big part, is like, I want to continue, you know, there's all these books out there, but to give new scholarship that room to grow, and to just show people there's always new things. All 3 of these books have come out in the last year. So like, you know, give them something. People have read a lot of this stuff. Most people on the tour are pretty knowledgeable. You know, they've read Manhunt. Some of them haven't, but a lot of them are, you know, they got hooked by something. So being able to present, here's new things, you know, is very important to me, as my history is, my background is as an educator. So all of this comes from a place of, I want to teach you more. I want you to be interested. I want you to go out and find new things that, you know, excite you about this. So luckily we're going to have the opportunity to do that.
Well, I think that's awesome you're doing that, because the one thing we always say on here is like, read, question what you read, and keep reading about it. And because guess what? Your opinion can change about something. Mine has about things in the Civil War and studying the assassination. It's because like, you just have to keep reading. You can't stay stagnant with what one person is arguing, because stuff is found all the time. And the way someone interprets a document might be different than the way someone else does. Like, and just what are their biases going into it as well. So I think that's really awesome. You're having that new scholarship and introducing people to it.
And it's so helpful to, I mean, you need that. We need that as historians ourselves. We need to be challenged on our ideas. You know, before we started recording, we were talking about a recent book that kind of puts it on that the Confederate government and Confederate Secret Service was behind, you know, Booth, that they were controlling him and whatnot. And now we don't agree with that, but I will say, reading that book and then, you know, researching the claims makes me a better historian. Now, I will say I get tired when I'm constantly having to look into the Booth escape theories, which have no merit. There's differences from conspiracy theories, which I'm not going to waste my time on, but legitimate challenges to my own beliefs, or even Darren, like, as you were recounting the escape of Booth, you and I have slightly different timelines on when Booth was in the pine thicket to his attempt to cross the river, because there is conflicting information about exactly when those crossings happen based on different sources. And so it's important to be upfront about that, to be like, yeah, you could take this tour with Darren and he might give you a slightly different timeline on when they were at these places, because we don't have ironclad, and it's important to be honest about that, to be like, hey, this is why I base mine on this, or like when did Booth break his leg? I'll give you the reason why I believe one a little bit more than the other, but I'm not gospel on this, and we'll never really know. And that, I like that part about history. A lot of people don't. They get frustrated because they want to know. But I think it shows the complexity of it, and you need to have that open mind. If you think what I believe is true, we see the fallacy of that in modern day politics, when there is no adapting to new information, and we're worse for it when we don't take in new information and alter our beliefs accordingly, when we just dig in on what we believe, regardless of the reality of the situation. And it's dangerous. And as historians, we have to be willing to be challenged and to acknowledge, you know, we absolutely can be wrong. But why do we believe the way that we do, and be open to change?
Yeah, absolutely agree.
You talk about minds of men. You talk about people telling stories of what they remember, and of course the dates aren't going to be 100%, but it's you can kind of pick and choose and realize it's somewhere in there. You get a good idea of it. But like to your point, something like this is going to lead to conspiracy theories, going to lead to a whole bunch of different things, because because people want something like the Lincoln assassination to fit in the box perfectly. It has to make sense for this reason, because there's no way otherwise. And that's the thing. And I've read a whole bunch of books just like you have, and some of them you can tell are based, they're using sources that you can just tell are kind of been debunked. That book we were talking about earlier is one of those examples. But again, it's interpretation. And
the evidence exists. It's just whether you want to put your support behind it. And we all have different, you know, levels of what we feel is convincing enough. And that's fine. Like that's healthy. I don't have a problem with people who truly believe the Confederacy was the overall hand in this. Like, I understand why you believe that, and I can see the evidence. I am not convinced by it. I wish I had more. If you had more, I would not be against changing my view on it. I just, what we have, I see is smoke. I don't see the gun, and I don't think the smoke. I think there's other explanations for the smoke, and that's okay. That's how we do history.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'll have a conversation of a beer with anybody telling these stories and tell what they think and stuff like that. But yeah, it just all depends on the slant you want to guess. But at the end of the day, John Wilkes Booth, he committed easily the greatest crime in American history. It's a crime that we're still dealing with today in modern politics. A lot of the unfortunately, we said before, the Civil War was like you have a really bad broken leg, and because of Lincoln's assassination, it was not allowed to heal correctly. So even today, we're still dealing with the residents of that injury, and that's where John Wilkes Booth really stole this country. And if you really think about it, if you really want to talk about it, it's not so much what happens in April of 1865; it's how it affected history since then, and we're still living with it. And then that's something. That's why it's important to study this. That's why there are people that we know who want nothing to do with the conspiracy. They don't want to talk about John Wilkes Booth. They don't want to talk about Mary Surratt. They don't want to talk about these people because it's a dark part of history. But you got to study it. You have to. Doesn't mean you're a crazy Booth person and you're living with with all this conspiracy stuff. But you have to. If you really want to study Lincoln, you got to study Booth.
Yep.
Because history is always a time together now.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's sad that he got that infamy, and I understand that people were like, "Well, you're giving him what he wants, but there's no removing him from the equation, unfortunately, and it's not a veneration thing. It's one, but it is an important part of Lincoln's legacy, and that and the legacy of the country. Like, it's a terrible tragedy. I mean, Andrew Johnson you talk about like what set us up. Like, we don't know exactly what Lincoln, if he survived, what the rest of his presidency would have been. He would have had a lot of a struggle, trying to deal with bringing us all back together. I don't know, how to bring in the South back, even the ideas of how to do it, how that could have been done successfully and tried to respect the rights of the freedmen. But we know what it looks like when it was done horribly, because that's what happened with Andrew Johnson. And so you just, we may not know what the alternative, what our country would look like today had Lincoln lived, but we do know the repercussions of him dying, as you note, Darren, and that it's like, well, this impact is with us today, and this figure, he is, as I always point out, like, he's a terrible human being, like horrible racist, white supremacist, like, and he acted as a coward, shot an unarmed man in the back of the head. It was an act of a coward, fueled by these delusions of grandeur, and we talk about his psyche a lot, and that it's hard to grasp, but at the same time, it more than ever, you can see Booth is a product of radicalization based on a very specific political ideology. And unfortunately, it is still incredibly prevalent today, in that you see people who are equally polarized and radicalized by untrue, political, beliefs about the world, and that it's dangerous, and it leads to things like this. And so we have to approach that. And I think Booth is a cautionary tale, because we like to look at the other assassins like Lee Harvey Oswald and be like, well, he was a nobody, loser, but Booth was successful. He had fame, he had fortune, he had friends, he had everything, and he still fell to this radicalization in his life that caused him to become, an assassin and to kill our country's greatest president. And so if he can fall to that, it's not just, loser people like we like to think, but if we really look at ourselves and see that all of us can fall for this if we are not careful in how we, look at the world, look inside ourselves, that, these things can happen to us all. And that's why he is valuable to study. Not because he did, not just because he did something terrible, but because it is helping us look inward into preventing that same type of hatred and radicalization from controlling us in a modern world. Because people fall for it today, different reasons, but it's so similar to see. You can see Booth in the eyes and actions of people living today who don't realize how far they have radicalized themselves.
That is true.
Completely
That
agree.
is true. That's why it's important to study it. You have to study it, because you don't want to normalize it. You want to study it for what it was. So. That's a good place to drop it up here. I think. I think for people, we'll share it again on the tour. We'll do one of the April ones, probably the Sunday one. I think we talked about that.
We're running low on spots on the first April one,
but
and we'll be doing it again. Yeah, I would love to have you guys on that one. That'd be great. And then we will definitely be doing them in the fall.
Okay,
I don't have dates yet, but I'm getting these first 3 done. Then we're announced dates. And if you go to Lincoln Conspirators, I'm still using my other site. I'm getting used to the whole I own a business thing. If you go to Lincoln Assassination Tours, on the main page, there is an area at the bottom where you can join an email list where I'm not going to spam you a bunch, but when we announce new dates, that'll be on there. Of course, it's on social media. Like we have our Facebook page, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube page, which will hopefully have more stuff on it once we shoot some video on this tour. And if you two come on one of these tours, I might task you with being little photographers for me to help, because it's hard as I'm doing it. I have helpers. My wife will be on the first one in March, but she won't be able to come out for the April tours. So trying to get me some of the photographs I have is before the beard, my baby face, and it's more me being like. So I'm not the most photogenic but we'll have stuff on our YouTube channel too, trying to get some videos out there. But cool. I'm excited to do them again. And it is a business, but for me, I do the tour once I can break even. Like it's not like I'm trying to make a fortune. Again, my background is elementary education. I'm used to not making any money. Like that's what I signed up for as a career. And so it really was out of the desire to do this again and share this history with folks in person, because I see how important it is and also just how much people can enjoy it. Yeah. So I appreciate everyone who wants to join us for this journey. And even if as long as I make enough to rent the bus and do it, I will be there. So that's why I'm excited about, helping more people experience this.
Well, we are excited that you were doing the tours again, and we're so happy to have you join us again for this episode to talk about it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I'm always here to chat with you all.
It's always a lot of fun talking about this stuff. So sign up for the tours. It's going to be, they're selling out quick. He's like T Swift over here. It's tough to get a ticket. So the March one sold out. He's got 2 seats left on the April.
Well, it's not. I actually have. My March tour was sold out, and then a party from March switched to April. So I have 3 as of us recording. I have 3 left. 3 seats left in March. 2 for the April 18th tour, and like 16 for the April 19th tour. So we're close to selling out some of them, but yeah.
Okay. So hopefully we get a bunch of podcast listeners in for that April one. See if we can get a.
That'd be great. And you guys can heckle me from the bus, which will just be fabulous.
Mary's gonna sit in the back and just yell "wrong" every song. Be one of those guys. But in any case, anyway, thanks for joining us as always, Dave. It's always one of our favorite people to talk to about this stuff. It's such a fun thing to talk about, and it's just an important thing to talk about. Mm-hmm. Now you're coming all the way back east again. To do this again, so good for you for doing this. And I know it's one of your passions, so to get you back out here again will be a good time. So, all right. So,
here's my one request: if you guys come for a tour, I want another shirt, because this one is faded because I wear it all the time.
Okay,
so that is my request. You guys want one?
Okay,
I'll give you a sticker for a shirt. I don't know if that's an even trade, but I need another one.
Pretty good deal. I'm sure we can make that happen. So, all right. So off we go. Any final words from you, Mary? What's coming up for us next?
So we are going to be getting into our episodes about Shiloh, which we still have to kind of nail down what we're going to talk about with that battle. And then at some point we are going to be doing an episode this year about the election of 1880 as well. So that's another idea that we have as well. We will be revisiting some more about the first Kansas, because we got a lot of good feedback about that episode. So talking about some of the battles that they were involved in, like Poison Spring.
And we'll be doing a presentation here in town about a month or so, a few weeks ago, on the Irish Brigade, or on St. Patty's Day over at...
Actually, on the 14th, which is why we can't make the tour.
Right.
Understood.
So we'll be doing that. So come out for the Getty's Gear for our presentation.
Unless, of course, you were on Dave's tour, then...
If you're on Dave's tour, we'll give you a pass. We'll give you a special dispensation. Just prove it by showing us the sticker, or that's it.
Yeah, that's right.
Definitely. So we had a lot of fun stuff coming up. So again, Dave, thanks again for joining us. Hopefully, I'm glad to see you're successful with this, because I know you did a lot of these before, and so I know how hard it is to get people out there and lead them, because you have to have a special group of people to spend the day visiting these places. It's fun,
absolutely.
But it's fast how fast the sunlight disappears on you when you do this. It goes so
Yes.
fast. You have to chop. You got to move. So you're doing God's work by getting out there and so on.
Well, I'm very grateful for you guys who have helped to get the word out. I mean, I started this thing being like, I don't know if anyone's going to want to do them anymore, or, I don't have I'm just starting this thing fresh, and just having the support of you guys supporting the things on online. And, this is great. I'm so appreciative of it. But yeah, I've been blown away by people, not only wanting to do it again, but just like, being able to find it, and like being able, I was very bold in being like, we're going to do 3 tours. And I don't have any, I mean, I have experience, but no one knows this new company thing. And it's just, the turnout has just been amazing. I'm very grateful to everyone who has signed up for tours or just shown an interest. Yeah, the dates may not work, but we're going to keep doing them. And as often as I can do them, I just love doing it. And thank you so much for letting me come on and kind of hawk the tour a little bit. It's very nice of you both.
No, it's our pleasure. It's always a great thing. So, all right, off we go, Mary. So any final words from you? I say it for real this time.
Thank you again, Dave, for joining us, and thank you, Darren, bringing it like you always do, and thank you to our listeners for supporting us through these last 164 episodes.
One more stain on the old banner.
Yep.
Never forget that, right? Off we go. So again, thanks for Dave Taylor for joining us. We'll see you all on the other side.
See y'all later.